$500. Solara Wyndham's voice cracked as she raised her weathered hand, the auction house falling deadly silent around her.
Ow!
Every eye in Thornbush Valley turned to stare at the dirt-poor cowgirl who'd just bid her entire life. Savings on the most dangerous man in 3 territories, Cain Ravencrest stood chained on the platform like a caged wolf, his obsidian hair falling across cold amber eyes that promised death to anyone fool enough to cross him. The iron shackles around his wrists bore fresh blood from his attempts to break free, and his torn black shirt revealed scars that told stories of violence and survival. Going once, going twice, Auctioneer Montgomery Brass stammered clearly, hoping someone else would outbid the girl who couldn't afford shoes without holes, sold to the young lady in the front. Solara's knees nearly buckled as the reality hit her. She'd just purchased a convicted killer, a man whose reputation for cruelty stretched from Colorado to Texas. The crowd began backing away as she approached the platform, their whispers following her like vultures. "You're either the bravest woman alive or the most foolish," Sheriff Beaumont Thorne muttered as he unlocked Cain's chains. "This one killed 3 men in Deadwood, burned down a saloon in Silver Creek, and they say he once skinned a man alive for looking at him wrong." Cain's predatory gaze fixed on Solara, taking in her patched calico dress and the desperate determination in her storm-gray eyes. Most women cowered when they looked at him. This one stood straighter. "What's your game, girl?" His voice was whiskey and smoke, dangerous as a loaded gun. "Nobody spends their last dollar on damaged goods without wanting something." Solara lifted her chin, refusing to show the terror clawing at her throat. "I need a foreman for my ranch. You need work that won't get you hanged. Seems like a fair trade." Cain laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Your ranch? A patch of scrubland outside town, where your daddy died trying to make something grow?" "Lady, you're more desperate than I thought." Heat flared in Solara's chest. Her father had died defending that land from claim jumpers, and she'd be damned if she'd let this black-hearted devil mock his memory. "That patch of scrubland has the best water rights in the valley and mineral deposits that would make a railroad baron weep." "I'll weep," she snapped back. "But it's overrun with rustlers and claim jumpers who think a woman alone is easy pickings. I need someone mean enough to scare them off and smart enough to help me prove what's buried under that dirt." For the first time since the auction began, genuine interest flickered in Cain's eyes. "And what makes you think I won't just put a bullet in your back and take it all for myself?" Solara stepped closer, close enough to smell the leather and danger that clung to him like cologne. "'Cause, Mr. Ravencrest, I know exactly who you are, and I know why you really ended up on that auction block." Cain's entire body went rigid. "You don't know anything." "I know about Magdalena," Solara whispered, watching his face transform from mild interest to deadly fury. "I know what they did to her. I know you've spent 3 years hunting the men responsible." Before Cain could respond or strangle her where she stood, Solara turned and began walking toward the door. "My wagon's outside. You can discuss your employment on the ride to the ranch." She made it exactly 5 steps before his voice stopped her cold. "How do you know that name?" Solara paused, her hand on the doorframe, and spoke without turning around. "Because Magdalena was my sister." The auction house erupted in shocked murmurs, but Solara was already stepping into the harsh afternoon sunlight, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. She'd just revealed her deepest secret to the most dangerous man in the territory. Now she had to pray he wouldn't kill her for it. The wagon ride to Wyndham Ranch stretched through 15 miles of broken dreams and failed ambitions. Solara kept her hands steady on the reins while Cain sat beside her in suffocating silence, his presence radiating menace like heat from a forge. "Magdalena never mentioned having a sister," he finally said, his voice carrying the weight of old grief. "Half-sister," Solara corrected, guiding the horses around a washout in the road. "Same mother, different fathers. Mama sent her to live with relatives in Silver Creek when she was 16. Said the valley wasn't safe for a girl with her ... gifts." Cain's jaw tightened. Magdalena's gifts had been her cursed beauty so striking it drove men to madness. A voice like honey and silk and a heart to trusting for the brutal world they lived in. "She wrote me letters," Solara continued, her voice barely audible over the creaking wagon wheels. Told me about the handsome stranger who'd captured her heart. Described you perfectly the way you laughed, the scar on your left shoulder. From a mountain lion? Even that birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your enough? Kane's hand moved instinctively to his ribs, where that very birthmark lay hidden beneath his shirt. If you're her sister, why didn't you come to Silver Creek? Why didn't you help her? The question hung between them like a blade. Solara's knuckles went white on the reins as memories she'd tried to bury clawed their way to the surface. Because I was 17 and trapped on a failing ranch with a dying father, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Because Mama made me promise to keep Daddy's land in the family no matter what. Because by the time I got her last letter, she swallowed hard. By the time I got her last letter, she was already dead. Kane studied her profile, noting the way her shoulders shook with suppressed emotion. For 3 years, he'd carried his rage like a poisonous snake in his chest, letting it consume everything good in him. But this girl, this woman, had lost Magdalena too. What did her last letter say? He asked quietly. Solara reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from countless readings. She said she was scared. That she'd discovered something about the men you both thought were friends. She said if anything happened to her, I should find you and give you this. With trembling fingers, she handed him a small silver locket. Kane's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it, the same locket he'd given Magdalena for her 19th birthday. The one she'd been wearing when they found her body. The sheriff said it was missing, he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. She hid it before they came for her. Sewed it into the lining of her dress and wrote me where to find it. Solara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She also wrote about the mark you carry, the one that proves your bloodline. Kane went deadly still. What mark? Solara pulled the wagon to a halt beside a small creek and turned to face him fully. Her gray eyes were steady, despite the tears threatening to spill over. The tattoo on your back, she said softly. The one that marks you as the last surviving heir to the Ravencrest fortune. The one that proves you're not just some drifter with a dark past, you're the rightful owner of the largest silver mine in Colorado territory. Kane's hand moved unconsciously to his back, where the intricate tattoo had been burned into his skin during a childhood he'd tried to forget. Only 3 people had ever known what it meant: his dying mother, the tribal shaman who'd marked him, and ... double quotes, Magdalena figured it out, didn't she? Solara continued. She realized who you really were, and that's why they killed her. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The mine, the fortune, the men who'd pretended to be his friends while planning his murder. They'd killed Magdalena to keep her quiet and tried to kill him to steal his birthright. Josiah Blackthorne, he snarled, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. Cornelius Wade, Benedict Ashworth. The 3 most powerful men in Silver Creek. Solara nodded. The ones who've been systematically buying up land around your family's old mine. The ones who thought you were dead after that ambush 3 years ago. Kane's amber eyes blazed with deadly purpose. You're about to learn just how alive I am. Not yet, Solara said firmly. First, we save my ranch. Then we destroy them properly. For the first time in 3 years, Kane Ravencrest smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Wyndham Ranch materialized from the dust like a mirage built from stubbornness and hope. The main house bore bullet holes from the last raid, its windows boarded up with whatever lumber Solara could find. The barn leaned precariously to one side, held upright by sheer willpower and strategically placed support beams. Home sweet home, Solara said with forced cheer, though Kane could hear the desperation underneath.
I'll wait.
I know it doesn't look like much, but her words died as a rifle shot cracked across the valley, sending dirt geysers up around the wagon wheels. 6 armed men emerged from behind the barn, their faces covered with bandanas and their weapons trained on the new arrivals. Well, drawled their leader, a snake-thin man with dead eyes and a silver tooth. Little Solara found herself a pet. It's bad he won't live long enough to warm your bed. Kane moved with lethal grace, diving from the wagon and rolling behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. His hand found the knife hidden in his boot just as Solara threw herself flat against the wagon bed. Viper Jameson, she shouted over the gunfire. I should have known Blackthorn would send his favorite lapdog. The name hit Kane like a physical blow. Viper Jameson, one of the men, who'd been there the night they tried to kill him, the night Magdalena died. Rage, pure and primal, flooded his system as 3 years of carefully contained fury finally found its target. What happened next would be talked about in Thornbush Valley for generations. Kane erupted from behind the water trough like an avenging demon, his knife finding the first gunman's throat before the man could blink. He rolled, came up with the dead man's pistol, and put 2 bullets center mass into the second attacker. Impossible, Viper breathed, his silver tooth catching the light as his face went pale with recognition. You're supposed to be dead. Disappointed? Kane's voice carried the promise of hell itself as he advanced on the remaining men. Don't worry, Viper. You'll be joining me real soon. The gunfight lasted 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 5 men lay dead in the dirt, and Viper Jameson knelt in the dust with Kane's knife at his throat, blood trickling from a dozen shallow cuts. Please, Viper whimpered, all his swagger gone. I was just following orders, Blackthorn said. Blackthorn sent you to kill the girl, Kane interrupted, pressing the blade deeper. Just like he sent you to kill Magdalena, just like he tried. To kill me, Solara approached slowly, her rifle trained on Viper's head. Her storm gray eyes held no mercy as she looked down at the man who'd terrorized her for months. You burned my south pasture, she said conversationally, poisoned my water holes, murdered my foreman and his family. Business Viper gasped. Nothing personal. Everything's personal when it's my land, Solara replied. Then to Kane. He's all yours. But Kane didn't move to finish the kill. Instead, he grabbed Viper by the throat and hauled him to his feet. You're going to ride back to Silver Creek, he said, his voice deadly calm. You're going to tell Blackthorn and his partners that Kane Ravencrest is alive? I'm coming. For what they stole, tell them I'm coming for blood. He released Viper, who stumbled toward his horse like a man in a nightmare. And Viper? If I see you on this land again, I'll skin you alive and nail your hide to the barn door. As Viper rode away at full gallop, Solara studied her new foreman. With something approaching, she'd bought herself a killer. But what she'd gotten was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. We need to bury these bodies, she said practically, though her hands shook as she lowered her rifle. We need to prepare for war, Kane corrected, his amber eyes scanning the horizon for more threats. Blackthorn won't wait long to make his next move? Then we'd better get started. Solara's chin lifted with familiar determination. Welcome to Wyndham Ranch, Mr. Ravencrest. Hope you're ready to fight for it. Kane looked at the bullet-scarred house, the dying land, and the brave woman who'd risked everything to bring him home. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something besides rage stirring in his chest. Lady, he said softly, fighting is what I do best. The attack came at dawn, just as Kane had predicted. 30 armed men surrounded the ranch house while the mist still clung to the valley floor, their leader's voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. Kane Ravencrest. Josiah Blackthorn's cultured tones carried the arrogance of a man accustomed to getting his way. I know you're in there, boy. Come out and face me like a man. From her position at the upstairs window, Solara watched the silver-haired mine owner dismount from his black stallion with theatrical flair. Even at 50, Blackthorn cut an imposing figure in his expensive suit and polished boots. But she could see the fear lurking behind his cold blue eyes. He's scared, she whispered to Kane, who knelt beside her with a rifle trained on Blackthorn's chest. He should be, Kane replied grimly. Scared men make mistakes. Below, Blackthorn continued his performance. You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Kane. Killing my men, frightening away my business partners. But I'm prepared to be reasonable. Surrender now, and I'll make your death quick. Kane's finger tightened on the trigger, but Solara's hand on his wrist stopped him. Wait, she breathed. Look at his neck. Kane shifted his aim and sucked in a sharp breath. There, gleaming against Blackthorn's throat, hung a silver chain with a familiar pendant, Magdalen's wedding ring, the one Kane had placed on her. Finger 3 days before her murder, White-hot rage exploded behind his eyes, but years of survival had taught him patience. He forced his breathing to steady, his heartbeat too slow. When he spoke, his voice carried across the yard with deadly calm. "Nice necklace, Josiah. Where'd you get it?" Blackthorn's hand moved instinctively to the chain, his face flushing with anger at being caught in his cruelty. "A trophy," he called back, "from a very satisfying evening. She screamed your name at the end, you know? Right before the rifle shot took off Blackthorn's hat and parted his silver hair. Next one takes your head," Kane snarled. "Keep that filthy mouth shut, or I'll shut it permanently." "You always were too emotional," Blackthorn sneered, though he'd gone pale. "Just like your father. It's like that whore you thought you'd marry." This time Solara had to physically restrain Kane from shooting. "He's trying to make you angry," she hissed. "Don't give him what he wants." "What I want," Blackthorn continued, "is very simple. Sign over your claim to the Ravencrest mine, and I'll let you and your little girlfriend ride away. Refuse, and I'll burn this place to the ground with both of you inside." "Counteroffer," Kane called back, his voice like winter wind. "Your men ride out now, and maybe I'll let some of you live long enough to reach the territorial prison." Blackthorn's laughter was ugly. "You're outnumbered 32-2, boy. What makes you think because he's not alone?" The voice came from behind Blackthorn's men. And suddenly, the morning erupted in gunfire, as Sheriff Beaumont Thorne and 20 deputies emerged from concealment around the ranch perimeter. Solara had sent word to the sheriff the night before, and the lawmen had been only too happy to finally have grounds to arrest the territory's most notorious claim jumper. The battle was fierce but brief. Blackthorn's hired guns were killers, but they weren't soldiers. The deputies were professionals who'd been waiting years for this chance at justice. When the smoke cleared, half of Blackthorn's men lay dead in the dirt. The others knelt with their hands behind their heads, weapons scattered around them like fallen leaves. Only Blackthorn himself remained standing, his expensive suit torn and his face bloodied from a deputy's rifle butt. Kane descended the porch steps like a stalking predator, his amber eyes fixed on the man who'd stolen everything he'd ever loved. In his hand, he carried a rope with a noose already tied. "Kane, no," Sheriff Thorne warned. "He gets a trial." "He got his trial 3 years ago when he murdered my wife," Kane replied, his voice deadly quiet. "The jury was me, and the verdict is death." Blackthorn's composure finally cracked. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine." "Actually," Solara said, stepping onto the porch with a leather satchel in her hands, "we can prove everything." She opened the satchel and pulled out a stack of documents, her gray eyes blazing with triumph. "Magdalena didn't just figure out who you really were, Kane. She found proof of what they were doing. Forged deeds, bribes to territorial officials, murder contracts written in Blackthorn's own hand." Blackthorn's face went ashen. "Impossible. We searched everywhere after we killed her." "The hilltop overlooking your old ranch," Thorne replied gently. "Under the oak tree where she said you used to watch sunsets together?" Tears ran freely down Kane's weathered cheeks as he clutched Magdalena's final message to his chest. Even in death, she'd been trying to protect him, trying to free him from the chains of his grief. "It's over, Blackthorn," he said, standing to face his defeated enemy. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." But Blackthorn had one last surprise. With his good arm, he pulled a stick of dynamite from his coat, his thumb poised over the fuse lighter. "I can't have my revenge," he snarled. "Then we all die together." The explosion that followed shook the entire canyon, sending rock slides cascading down the cliff faces. When the dust settled, Josiah Blackthorn was nothing more than a crater in the sacred ground. His evil finally purged from the world. The wedding bells of the newly built Ravencrest Chapel rang out across the valley as Kane and Solara emerged. Into brilliant sunshine, their hands joined and their faces radiant with joy. The entire territory had come to celebrate miners and ranchers, sheriffs and shopkeepers, all united in witnessing the marriage of two souls who'd found their perfect match. Sheriff Thorne raised his glass of champagne as the reception began in the meadow beside Magdalena's oak tree. "To Kane and Solara Ravencrest, may their love be as enduring as the mountains and as precious as the silver they mine." The crowd cheered, but Kane only had eyes for his bride. Solara had never looked more beautiful, her storm-gray eyes sparkling with happiness as she danced in his arms. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing their conversation from a year ago. "Only one," Cain replied, spinning her gracefully among the wildflowers. "I regret it took me so long to realize that love isn't about replacing what you've lost. It's about being brave enough to build something new." As the sun set over the valley they now called home, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Cain felt a presence beside him. Not the crushing weight of grief he'd carried for so long, but something lighter, Magdalena's blessing on his new beginning. The Ravencrest mine continued to prosper, providing jobs for hundreds of families. Benedict Ashworth's testimony had helped solve dozens of cold cases, bringing closure to grieving relatives across 3 territories. And in the chapel built in Magdalena's memory, Cain and Solara would raise their children to understand that love conquers 11 death, even revenge, even the darkest chapters of the past. The poor cowgirl who'd bought a dangerous man at auction had gained more than a foreman, she'd found her soulmate. And the cruel cowboy with the feared tattoo had discovered that redemption was possible, even for the most broken hearts. Their love story would echo through the valley for generations, a testament to the truth that sometimes the best futures grow from the most unlikely beginnings. In a land where justice was often decided by the fastest gun, they'd proven that the strongest force of all was 2 hearts beating as one, as the evening stars appeared over Devil's Canyon. Now renamed angels rest in honor of those who'd found peace there. Cain and Solara Ravencrest danced on, their love as eternal as the mountains that watched over their valley home. "The hilltop overlooking your old ranch," Thorn replied gently. "Under the oak tree where she said you used to watch sunsets together." Tears ran freely down Cain's weathered cheeks as he clutched Magdalena's final message to his chest. In death, she'd been trying to protect him, trying to free him from the chains of his grief. "It's over, Blackthorn," he said, standing to face his defeated enemy. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." But Blackthorn had one last surprise. With his good arm, he pulled a stick of dynamite from his coat, his thumb poised over the fuse lighter. "I can't have my revenge," he snarled. "Then we all die together." The explosion that followed shook the entire canyon, sending rock slides cascading down the cliff faces. When the dust settled, Josiah Blackthorn was nothing more than a crater in the sacred ground, his evil finally purged from the world. The wedding bells of the newly built Ravencrest Chapel rang out across the valley as Cain and Solara emerged into brilliant sunshine, their hands joined and their faces radiant with joy. The entire territory had come to celebrate miners and ranchers, sheriffs and shopkeepers, all united in witnessing the marriage of 2 souls who'd found their perfect match. Sheriff Thorn raised his glass of champagne as the reception began in the meadow beside Magdalena's oak tree. "To Cain and Solara Ravencrest, may their love be as enduring as the mountains and as precious as the silver they mine." The crowd cheered, but Cain only had eyes for his bride. Solara had never looked more beautiful, her storm-gray eyes sparkling with happiness as she danced in his arms. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing their conversation from a year ago. "Only one," Cain replied, spinning her gracefully among the wildflowers. "I regret it took me so long to realize that love isn't about replacing what you've lost. It's about being brave enough to build something new." As the sun set over the valley they now called home, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson, Cain felt a presence beside him, not the crushing weight of grief he'd carried for so long, but something lighter, Magdalena's blessing on his new beginning. The Ravencrest mine continued to prosper, providing jobs for hundreds of families. Benedict Ashworth's testimony had helped solve dozens of cold cases, bringing closure to grieving relatives across 3 territories. And in the chapel built in Magdalena's memory, Cain and Solara would raise their children to understand that love conquers all of death, even revenge, even the darkest chapters of the past. The poor cowgirl who'd bought a dangerous man at auction had gained more than a foreman, she'd found her soulmate. And the cruel cowboy with the feared tattoo had discovered that redemption was possible, even for the most broken hearts. their love story would echo through the valley for generations. A testament to the truth that sometimes the best futures grow from the most unlikely beginnings. In a land where justice was often decided by the fastest gun, it'd proven that the strongest force of all was two hearts beating as one. As the evening stars appeared over Devil's Canyon, not renamed Angel's Rest in honor of those who'd found peace there, Cain and Solara Ravencrest danced on, their love as eternal as the mountains that watched over their valley home.